Hello, how are you today?
Good.
Wonderful. If you could state your full name for me, as it is on your birth certificate.
Okay. It's Kiah Peña.
Okay.
Kiah Peña.
Okay. And do you go by Kiah, or do you have any nicknames?
I just go by Kiah.
Okay. Where did you grow up, and how old are you?
I was originally born in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. I moved here when I was about 4, so I basically lived in the Arlington, Texas area. 20 years now.
Okay. What ethnicity are your parents, and where are they from?
My dad is African American. My mom is Hispanic. I'm not too sure about my African background. I do know that my mom's family is a mixture of, they came from Spain to Puerto Rico to Mexico. So kind of a blend of that. We mostly say that we're Mexican.
Do a lot of people automatically assume that you are like Ethiopian or black or something?
Yes. I do get asked if I'm Ethiopian a lot. Definitely a good amount of people also just ask if I'm mixed or I have other things in me. And then some people will just assume I'm black.
Okay. What was it like growing up, being a child of mixed ethnicity?
It was, I would say, difficult at times. It was, kind of just something you dealt with. I lived with my mom, and she's very lighter complexion than I am. So a lot of questions were asked by kids at school, why is your mom white? Or, were you adopted? Or things like that. And it was confusing to me. I was like, that's just my mom. Things like that. Funny looks in the supermarkets, and just people assuming we weren't together because we were obviously looked different. So I would say it was difficult in times like that. Even when I'm older now, people just assume that we're not together or we're just friends. So it's definitely an interesting relation, I guess.
Okay. You mentioned that there were some, difficult and terrible times. What were some of the difficult and terrible times?
I would say, growing up how I did, I was very just aware of who I was. I was not just a black girl, I was also a Hispanic girl. I didn't, identify with my race to that extent, to, very, very proud of it. I was just kind of, I'm me, I'm Kiah. So, when people assume that I didn't act a certain way, that pertains to my race, it was very confusing to me, and it was just like, why do I have to act like that? So I think I was treated very different by people of my own races because I did act a different way. So that was always hard. Black people telling me that I wasn't black because I was mixed, and then, a lot of Mexican people, Hispanic people telling me that, I wasn't Hispanic because I couldn't speak Spanish, and there's no way, you didn't grow up in that household and stuff like that, but in my world, I feel like I did, so very, very confusing a lot of the time, I think.
Okay. In Arizona and compared to here in Texas, were there other mixed, half black, half Hispanic people for which you to be able to sort of look to see maybe sort of how to act and look for support?
I definitely don't think there was as many mixed kids when I was younger. There was definitely that few, but it was still something that was very like, you're different. I didn't have a lot of people that I related to in that sense. As I've gotten older, I've realized there is a lot more of us, and obviously it's more common today. There's a ton of kids that are of different ethnicities. But growing up, I think, especially in Arizona, it's very not as diverse as you would think. It's very Hispanic. There's a sprinkle of, I would say, black people, African American people, but not a lot of interracial, biracial people.
How old were you when you first started to notice the concept of race?
I guess my earliest memory would be starting school, so like kindergarten, 5 years old.
Okay. When was the first time that you felt that you were ostracized and, sort of called out because you weren't multiracial?
I would say probably around the same time. When I was younger, in kindergarten, I went to a school that was very diverse, so that was a good thing. I did get a lot of questions, but then we moved, and I was in Fort Worth for kindergarten, and I moved to Arlington, and the part of Arlington we were in was very Caucasian, school with a lot of white kids, so it was very. I felt different than some people. I mean, there was, those few that were like me, but I did definitely feel different. I felt sometimes I was treated different by the teachers, and then we moved again, and I was still in Arlington schools, but we lived more on another side of Arlington, and there was a lot of kids who looked like me, so I felt that I was more comfortable, more with people, again, who were like me. So I definitely think from a young age, first, second, third grade, I was noticed and ostracized. But then again, with moving, I was more comfortable and more with people, again, that were like me. So.
Was it more so from adults or peers your own age that you felt ostracized?
I would definitely say probably adults. I think being a young kid, I was misunderstood. I don't think I had a lot of behavioral issues, but I think just coming from a single parent household and then being biracial and being black and being Hispanic too, the teachers kind of looked at me different and just kind of assumed that any small behavior problems that I had that most kids probably would have just attributed to those things. So I feel like, I was always kind of treated like a special case in a sense. So yeah.
Growing up in Fort Worth for a little bit and then also Arlington, was there a difference in how you were treated by people or perceived?
Yes, definitely. Growing up in Fort Worth, it was, a lot more, a lot of diversity again in Fort Worth. So it was more comfortable. And then going to the part of Arlington that I was in, where I did get more the same color, it was different. It was, something you definitely noticed. I think now that was, 20 years ago? How old am I? 23. So 16 years ago, I think it's definitely diversified a lot more, especially Arlington being a melting pot, growing into a much larger city than it was. I think it's different now, but back then it was definitely more one color, and you saw the difference.
Growing up, did your family have any religious affiliations?
Yes. For most of my life, we've been Christian. We've attended church on and off. So.
Okay. Were you all Catholic or Baptist or non-denominational?
Yes, consider ourselves non-denominational.
Okay. What do you think is more damning to minorities here in America in the year 2015? Issue of race or that of religion?
I would definitely say race.
Why?
I think people don't care about religion as much. I think everyone, especially being in America, you're more, our most popular religion, I would assume, is Christianity. I definitely, know there's other things out there, but being a minority of different colors, being African American, Hispanic, anything like that, I think it's harder to get ahead if you're, someone of a minority rather than someone who's maybe a Buddhist or someone of Islam, so I think it's...
Growing up, were there any celebrities that you looked up to and sort of aspired to be your role models?
Not really. I definitely had a big infatuation with Aaliyah when I was younger. I think she represented something that, was really good at the time. She was very, pretty wholesome for the scene at that time, and beautiful, of course. I think every young black girl wanted to be just like her, so I think that was definitely something I aspired to be like her. It was a very sad time when she passed, so.
Growing up, did a lot of people, particularly white people, ever ask to touch your hair or ask you a lot of questions about your hair?
Always, yes.
What were some of the 3 most common questions you had?
Is your hair real? Especially if I would press out my hair, and it's a lot longer than it is right now. Is it real, or does it take a long time to get that hairstyle? And do you wash your hair? Very common.
Why do you think race is again such a big issue? You know, we had the civil rights, time about 50 years ago, and a lot of, hard work was put in to be able to have more racial equality. And then now we sort of have these issues again where, being a minority, it's still really, really challenging. Why do you think that is?
I think it's always been challenging. I think that there are people who kind of act like it doesn't exist, and it always has existed. I think it's such a big deal because, on surface level, we all look different. We all have different kind of customs and traditions, and it truly does make us different to the core. So I think that's a big part of why we treat people the way we do. We just aren't fully able to understand and put ourselves in other people's shoes. I think anything that's different to us is uncomfortable. So, my, white friends go over to a black person's house, it's uncomfortable for them. Not uncomfortable, it's just something that they don't know, so it can be uncomfortable. So I think that's why we have issues that we have today. Obviously, I don't think there's anything that truly makes us different. Again, just the values that we have. I mean, most people have the same values, but just I guess the way we go about them is maybe different. So it scares people.
Do you think this issue will ever go away? Do you think we'll ever truly live in a nation where all races are equal and no person has an advantage or disadvantage?
I don't think so in my lifetime. I think a long time from now, hopefully. I definitely think that with kids, of course, today being more interracial, just with a lot of people coming together and being more tolerant, that there is potential for that. But again, I don't see that happening for a really long time.
Are you familiar with the phrase white privilege?
Yes.
Do you think that it exists?
Yes.
Okay. How so?
My best friend growing up was white. We were friends for 7-8 years in our very pivotal points of life, maybe about 5th grade to middle of high school, and we did everything together. We were mischievous. We cut up in classes and stuff like that. And I think that I was always I feel like I got more trouble than she usually did. There was times, the principal called my mom and not her, but we did the same thing. Even when we went out, it was like, oh, that white girl, is fine, but, why is she hanging out with a black girl or anything? I feel like our relationship was looked at very differently. And again, especially the way we were treated by teachers. Our junior high year especially, we had a lot of classes together, and teachers treated us differently, but we were always, I feel like, doing the same things, cutting up in the same ways, being good in the same ways, but, of course getting in trouble a lot, so.
Okay. If you could be another race, and you have to pick an answer,
okay.
What would you choose and why?
That's hard. I would want to experience what it's like to be white, just to, again, I do feel like there's white privilege, so maybe to be looked at in a different way, and maybe given the benefit of the doubt more often because you're white would be refreshing, I think.
Okay. Do you think it's fair for white people to say that there is no racism in America, and do you think it's fair for them to have such a heavy involvement in the topic of race when it comes to being a minority and racism?
I think it's kind of ignorant for them to think that racism doesn't exist. I think that them trying so hard to prove that it doesn't exist just says that it's like, why do you have to fight that? I think that until they're placed in somebody else's shoes truly, which is impossible, I think, you can't begin to understand what it's like. It's like, me saying that I know what it's like to be a boy and he's standing up. I feel like that's, apples to oranges. You can't compare that. So I think that they really don't have a right to say anything like that. Again, because they haven't experienced it truly.
Okay. Were you ever called any racial slurs growing up, or even now as an adult?
Not to my face. I remember when I was younger, I don't remember how old I was, a kid jokingly called me Blackie Chan, but he didn't know me. So that was a little hurtful, just, weird. I didn't understand why he did it. I don't think any other times I've been called any racial slurs.
Okay. Do you think that you have felt more heat from white people about your race or blacks and Hispanics?
Blacks and Hispanics.
Why?
Because I am biracial. I think that it's... you would think that with those being, predominant, more so the minority groups, that it would be okay, but I think that Hispanics and blacks don't really have a lot of respect for each other. So then for me to be both, it's like, I guess confusing to some people. Again, a lot of growing up, black girls, said I wasn't black because I didn't act a certain way. And Hispanics, again, said I wasn't Hispanic because I couldn't speak the language. I didn't have family that was, in Mexico at this time. So I think I definitely felt a lot more hate from them, treating me like I wasn't who I really was for silly reasons.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Kiah.
Anytime.